If you recollect the Independence Day speech of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi on 15th August 2022, you would very well remember him talking about Panch Pran, the 5 vows. Among the 5 vows, the second is remove any traces of colonial mindset. We are a country where our ancestors used to say, na chaurya haryam, na rajya haryam, na cha bhatru bhajyam, na cha bharakari, vyayam kritam vardhate eva nityam vidyadhanam sarvadhanam pradhanam. It can neither be plundered by thief, nor can be squeezed by the king, cannot be divided by brothers, and does not fall on consumption. The more education is spent, the more it grows. This is the greatest of all wealth. We were a society which always believed in Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya. All be happy, all be healthy. We were a society which believed that the whole world is like one family. We were a society which respected and welcomed the guests and never hesitated in sharing the best things with the guest, because we always believed in Atithi Devo Bhava. So rich in education and culture we were. With the advent of East India Company initially and later by the British rule, we were made to believe that we don't have any substance in our education and culture. A sense of inferiority was injected just to demoralize the Indian society. As a language and later as a discipline, English arrived in India on the back of British colonialism. The purpose behind its initiation was to do what Macaulay, in his famous Minute on Education in the year 1935, outlined as follows, quote, I have no knowledge of either Sanskrit or Arabic, but I have done what I could to form a correct estimate of their value. I have read translations of the most celebrated Arabic and Sanskrit words. I have conversed both here and at home with men distinguished by their proficiency in the Eastern tongues. I am quite ready to take the Oriental learning at the valuation of the Orientalists themselves. I have never found one among them who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth of the whole native literature of India and Arabia. The intention behind quoting this statement at length here is to understand the dynamics behind the use of language as an instrument of power. Subsequently, Macaulay advocated in favor of creating a class of Indians who would be Indian in blood and color, but English in taste and obedience, in the morals and in intellect. And this objective lay at the basis of institutionalizing the study of English in India as a subject at a time when it was not even taught as such in the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. The efforts of Macaulay and his colleagues in initiating the disciplinary study of English in India constitute what we may refer as the first phase of English in India, which roughly runs from 1800 to 1857, if we also take into account the prior and simultaneous endeavors of East India Company and the missionaries towards the furtherance of the language in the country. The second phase from 1957 to 1980, and it represents the beginning of the Indian response to English, and most particularly to the most potent signifier of the colonial mission in India, William Shakespeare. At that point of time, there was an ongoing debate regarding whether to continue with the existing Orientalist system of education or to adopt the newly developed Anglicized system of education. It is worthwhile to note that a number of reformist intellectuals of the time, especially Raja Ram Mohan Rai, favored the introduction of English education in India in place of traditional mode of Oriental teaching. The plays of Shakespeare formed the most crucial component of the new mode of education introduced in the country. This was also the time when we witnessed the emergence of first generation of Macaulay's Indians who were devotedly working towards amalgamating the inherited heritage of Sanskrit and other sister Indian languages, learning with the Western principles of liberal humanism and secular outlook. Along with poetry, the novel emerged as an important genre, with Indian English writing during this period, with Bankim Chand Chatterjee's Ram Mohan's Wife setting the trend in this direction. The third phase, 1880 to 1947, coincided with the beginning of the anti-colonial struggle and culminating with the independence of the country. In this phase, study of English took a more democratic turn as more and more writers started writing in the language with their respective styles and approaches, which ranged from attempting to write in intimation of the colonial style toward Indianizing it in sync with the narrative vernacular languages of India. Among the writers of the period, we may mention the name of Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sri Aurobindo, Sarojini Naidu, Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao, and R.K. Narayan. The fourth phase, and possibly the most dynamic one so far, began with the independence of the country and has effectively continued till the present time. We can confidently argue that the dominant principle or sensibility underlying the English writing of post-independent period has been that of decolonization. Writers like Salman Rushdie, Amitav Ghosh, Khuswant Singh, Anita Desai, G.V. Dasani, Amish Tripathi, and others have greatly stretched and explored the possibility of experimenting with English language in terms of both form and content. We have designed category of literary studies commonly referred as the Indian writings in English. Of late, there have been attempts to decolonize the syllabi of English studies in universities across the country. And it is my pleasure to note that Department of English, University of Delhi, was amongst the first in the country to have incorporated authors' texts from the Indian languages in English translation into undergraduate and postgraduate syllabi. Texts like Ramayana and Mahabharata, as well as authors like Kabir, Ghalib, Premchand, Tagore are among the core components of English studies at the present time. Furthermore, research on regional text, authors, movements, etc. are being actively encouraged at the MPhil and PhD levels of the study. We must note that these radical innovations are not only enabling decolonization of English studies in India, but also facilitating the curriculum of literature in the Indian languages beyond their points of origin. These days, we can note with satisfaction the integration of the critical methodology of English studies with that of comparative literature, folklore and cultural studies, performance studies, etc. In this connection, translation has played a major role in expanding the corpus of English studies in India. In fact, major projects of translations are presently underway in many English departments of the country, facilitated both by themselves and in collaboration with institutions like the Sahitya Akademi, National Book Trust, National Translation Mission. More and more departments should get involved in undertaking English translation of significant regional texts from the literary cultures of the regions where they are located. With the arrival of National Education Policy 2020, an effort could be seen in the direction of leveling the increasing disparity between English on the one hand and the Indian languages on the other, including the Sanskrit. Nevertheless, pan-Indian outreach and popularity of English language and English studies within the academic and educational sectors of the country testifies the need for engaging more rigorously with the ability of language to foster the spirit of unity and equality among the inhabitants of the country, rather than being perceived as a symbol of high-class elitism, a caste and class-based inequalities. English should be seen as a promoter and torchbearer of equality and fraternity. A conference on English studies in India is ideally suited and situated to explore the manifold possibilities in this direction. I request that this conference should not become a ritualistic one and only discuss issues which are pleasant to hear to. We must also address some tough questions and try to find out solutions of them. Like, what is our priority in teaching, language or literature? As we see, as Honorable Vice Chancellor has rightly pointed out, most of the institutions are focusing on teaching literature and very rare opportunities to study language. There are very few institutions who teach phonetics. I very much doubt that many students could find difference between language and literature when they do a master's course in English or in any other language. Similar question can also be asked to many students to differentiate between the language and the script, and I am sure most of them would not be in a position to give an appropriate reply to that. So we need to address questions like that. Another question is, what is the perspective of professionalism, or to put it in other words, whom we are going to groom as language experts or communication experts? The trending quote in India and across the world is that we hire you for your technical skills and we fire you for your communication skills. When we will learn to design result-oriented courses, when we are going to use techniques to groom good teachers to teach English, are we really designing the courses which are tailor-made to the need of the industry? Another important question is how to maintain the sanctity of the language. As we all are accustomed with the information technology, and the use of information technology is very pertinent in our day-to-day life, the sanctity of language is in great danger. It's not related to English only, but it is related to almost all the languages. And when we depend on the technology, especially the mobile, definitely the purity of the language is in great danger. So this is an important question we must address too. English came to India to serve a different purpose. It did serve its purpose for substantial year. But now the time has changed. English has to understand the needs of the changing time. It has to rise above the occasion. To conclude, I dedicate few lines from the famous poem I Rise by Maya Angelou. I have been selective in picking up these lines, so kindly pardon if I am not reading the whole text. Out of the herds of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that is rooted in pain, I rise. I am a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that wondrously clear. I rise, I rise, I rise. Thank you very much.